on day 5 of week 2, and it's day 7 of our series, the A to Z of iconography at INSTUCEN. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for subscribing. Thank you very much for joining in with us. Today is the alphabet G, and it's everybody's favorite deity in India, Ganesha. Ganesha, Ganapati, Vinayaka, Ganaraya, Gajanana, Ekadanta, and all those different names that he's known by is one of the most popular deities in India. There are legends of him scattered across the length and breadth of India, and he is, as I said, perhaps the most beloved of all the deities. I have seen him in so many different avatars and so many different rupas scattered across the length and breadth of Asia. He's venerated not just in India, he's venerated not just in the Indian subcontinent, but all the way east towards Japan. So from Afghanistan to Japan, we have images of Ganesha, and he is a very, very popular deity. Identified mainly by the elephant's head and the very rotund structure, Lambodara as he's called, or Mahakaya as he's called in Sanskrit. He is usually portrayed forearmed, and from the lower right, his lower right is where I'm taking it. He holds his own broken tusk. Then he has in his upper right the ankusha or the elephant board. The upper left usually holds a fasa, a noose, or an axe, and the lower left, almost without exception, holds a sweetmeat, either a laddu or his favorite sweetmeat, the modaka. He is shown with one tusk broken. Usually his trunk is towards his left, and this is considered his benign form. If his trunk is turned towards the right, his right, then that is considered a non-benign form. And in the earliest days, he was not the Vignaharta that he is, but he was a Vignakarta. He was not a very kind, benevolent deity, but a rather fearsome deity in his earliest form. Even now, if you read the scriptures, he falls on both sides, and he needs to be propitiated before the beginning of any auspicious deed that is done. His Vahana is the Mushaka or the mouse. In the very early forms, it's a very small mouse that is shown in one corner of the statue or one corner of the stele, and then slowly, slowly increases in size till you have this beautiful image. This is from Sri Lanka, by the way, from a Buddhist temple at Kelaniya. Kelaniya is supposed to be one of the places where the Buddha visited on one of his 3 visits to Sri Lanka. And the Kelaniya temple is built over there. And on the walls of the Kelaniya temple, you have this beautiful image of Vinayaka. So his story is very, very interesting. Now, before I go there, he is sometimes shown on horseback and very rarely also shown on peacock back. Though the peacock is actually the Vahana of his brother, and that's another story altogether, perhaps for another day. He is the son of Shiva and Parvati, but he's actually born from the body of Parvati herself. She makes him out of clay and the dirt from her body and her sweat and imbibes him with life and then asks him to keep an eye on the house while she's having a bath. Shiva comes back home to find this young man stopping him from entering his own house, who engages in battle with him, and Shiva promptly lops his head off. Parvati comes out to realize that he's just killed his own son and tells him about it. There is much Rona Dhona, as in a good Indian Bollywood blockbuster. And then Shiva sends out his gunners to get the first head of the first animal that they can find. They come across an elephant, they take off his head and bring it to Shiva, who performs well. The first head transplant probably ever known in mythology or anywhere in the world, and gives this head to him. Now, interestingly, he's shown as a very slim and trim and muscular young man in his fully human form, and in this partly human zoomorphic form, he is shown in this rather rotund, very, as I said, very happy, very full-bellied, very chubby form. And this is a very interesting change that takes place. And this is the form in which he's known to us. From the earliest images we have, Ganesha is never thin. Ganesha is never scrawny. Always this large Mahakaya, the great body. Okay, and Lambodara, the great belly. So he is a deity without invoking him. nothing good can be done, nothing auspicious can be started. All weddings, all functions, all businesses, all puja, all part always have invoke him first. So much so that he is normally on the lintel of the doorway of the Garbhagriha of every single temple. That is how important he is. His favorite sweetmeat is the modaka, and the Maharashtrians believe that they make the best modaks. This is basically a jaggery and grated coconut that is cooked together with cardamom and then is filled inside a dough, a hot dough made with hot water and rice flour, and it is then steamed. So these are beautiful, almost onion-shaped sweetmeats which are steamed, and they are greatly beloved of Vinayak. Maharashtra is perhaps the core area of the cult of Ganesha, though Ganesha is known across the length and breadth of the country, north to south, east to west. There is no part where Ganesha's cult does not prevail. But the Ganapatya cult as such is a medieval cult that essentially has its roots in Maharashtra. And Maharashtra has the famous Ashtavinayak, which are 8 images of Ganpati, which are supposed to be Swayambhu and which are supposed to be completely natural images, untouched by human hand, so on and so forth. So the broken tusk is perhaps one of the biggest indicators, and there are very interesting stories about this broken tusk. The Matsya Puran talks about it, various other Puranas talk about it. The most popular legend is that the Mahabharata had to be written down, and Ved Vyas was engaged to write down the Mahabharata. He would recite it because he had lived it. But he said he would only recite it to somebody who could write as fast as he spoke. He would not repeat himself. And it is thus that this unenvious job fell to Ganesha, who realized that there would be no stylus that could keep up with the writing required by Ved Vyas. So he broke off his own tusk and used it as a stylus to write the Mahabharata. And therefore, the Mahabharata can never ever be read without invoking and thanking Ganesha himself. And this is why he has this tusk in one hand, broken tusk in one, and there are other stories about it too. There are some very interesting stories. A lot of versions have a cobra or a snake tied around his stomach, knotted in the front, just above his navel or below his navel sometimes. The legend for this, and this is a very popular story with children, is that he was once eating sweetmeats and he was so engrossed in eating them and he was eating them in such enormous quantities that his stomach couldn't keep up with it and his stomach burst. A passing snake laughed to see this hilarious vision of a god whose stomach had burst because he ate too much. So Ganesha reached out, grabbed the snake and used it to tie his belly back into place. And that is why the snake is permanently strapped to Ganesha's face. Others, of course, will tell you that this is to do with the entire Shaivite pantheon and the fact that the Shaivite pantheon has a very important place for snakes, so on and so forth. He has twin consorts usually called Riddhi and Siddhi, sometimes called Siddhi and Buddhi, depending on which part of the country you're in. In many parts, especially in southern India, he is shown with a single consort. So this is a beautiful image of him being given a bath in the miniature school style. And there is Shiva bringing water and Parvati bathing him in a very happy familial scene. On the right-hand side is a Raja Ravivarma lithotype of Ganesha with his twin wives, Riddhi and Siddhi. This is a very, very famous image. And almost nobody in Western India has not seen this image in somebody's house or somewhere. It has been reproduced so many, many times. The earliest images of Ganesha, though, are a little difficult to nail down. We know that by the 5th, 6th century AD, the cult of Ganesha is very prominent. We have a beautiful 7th century AD Ganesha image from Afghanistan on the left-hand side. We have a beautiful image of a Pallava Ganesha on the next to him. We have a beautiful image of a Pala Ganesha on the extreme right. So, and in the center, below, we have this beautiful image of Ganesha from Badami. So what we do know is by the 6th, 7th century AD, the cult of Ganesha has proliferated everywhere, and we have Ganesha icons in the iconography that we understand seen everywhere. including, as I said, this very rare Ganesha of two arms, okay, showing him as Ekadanta and with a large bowl full of sweetmeats that we have from Badami that you see on the bottom center. Ganesha's iconography has been, as I said, debated by many people as to whether he should have two arms or four. It's interesting that in the early phase, very often he's shown with just two arms. Four is the de rigueur, de facto position. But as you see on the extreme right-hand side, this beautiful Pala dancing Ganesha, and he's dancing in Tandav Nritya on the Mushaka, okay, which is in turn on a lotus. And he's in a beautiful eight-armed figure. Ganesha figurines in different styles, but essentially following the same rigorous rules of iconography are seen across the length and breadth of India. On the left-hand side, you have a beautiful Odishan Ganpati. On the top, you have a Vijayanagar style Ganpati. Center bottom, you have a typical Hoysala Ganpati, enormously elaborate, but again, don't miss the multi-hooded cobra strapped around his stomach in that. And you can see the cobra once again strapped around the stomach of Vijayanagar example. On the right-hand side is a very, very enigmatic Ganesha structure, which is found on top of a tall hill in Chhattisgarh all by itself. And sadly, this was toppled down the hill by a group of miscreants. And luckily, all the pieces were located and the image was restored over here. This is a very, very famous trekking image, a trekker's image from the Chhattisgarh region. And this completely out in the middle of nowhere, that you have this massive stone Ganesha that has been carried to the top in the medieval period. And there is a beautiful Yagnopavita made up of chains. If you look very closely at the image, that's again something quite rare. These are the Ashtavinayaks, Mayureshwar at Morgaon, Siddhivinayak at Siddhatek, Palaleshwar at Pali, Vardhavinayak at Mahad, Mahaganpati at Ranjangaon, Vigneshwar at Ozar, Girjatmak at Lenyadri, and Chintamani at Keud. Of these, Girjatmak is actually inside a Buddhist cave at Lenyadri. Okay. On the right-hand side is perhaps one of the most enigmatic and yes, one of the most interesting images of Vinayak. This is the Trishula Ganpati from Pune, belonging to the Peshwa period, typical Peshwa style, but a trifurcated trunk. And if you ever get a chance to do a walk in Pune with Dr. Manjari Bhalera of the Timavi, she does a fabulous walk of Trishula Ganpati at that entire area. So, all over the different types of painting styles that we have, the miniature paintings, the Thanjavur style, Ganesha is seen again and again. You have him beautifully on horseback in this Rajput miniature. You have him usually red colored or white colored of body. And that again is something that we will see once again. You have him in all different mediums. So from this beautiful ivory Ganesha of the Ganga dynasty, now in the Metropolitan Museum, this Chola bronze Ganesha that you see in the center, and this beautiful Heramba image from Nepal, which is a 16-armed image, and he's shown with his consort. And there are twin Mushakas, if you notice carefully. And this again is a very interesting style that is seen in Nepal. He's seen on a lot of coins. He's seen on the notes of Indonesia. So you see that beautiful image of Ganesha on a 20,000 rupiah note from the Bank of Indonesia. Most interesting is this recent development of this beautiful clay token with Ganesha on one side and a small inscription in the Brahmi script on the other side, and a bull above the Brahmi script. This is dated paleographically to somewhere around the 3rd, 4th century AD by paleographers, and that would make it one of the earliest ever known images of Ganesha that we have. But otherwise, we also have him from a large number of coins from the medieval period in India too. Ganesha is also known in Buddhism. This is a beautiful tanka on the left-hand side where he is Maharakta and he's always red colored. And you see him again dancing the Tandava, and you see the multi-armed image that we have. I think it's a 12-armed image of Ganesha, and he plays an important role in Tibetan Buddhism. He's also interestingly seen in later Jain, in the later Jain pantheon. He takes on the role of Kubera, the god of wealth, And he plays a very important role once Hemachandra starts preaching in the 12th century, the latter half of the 12th century. So this is when he makes a late entry into Jainism. This is an image from Palitana, from one of the Palitana temples. We also have him all over the rest of the world as we go eastward. There is the beautiful Indonesian one that you saw on the rupiah coin. By the way, in Indonesia, traditionally, non-vegetarian foods are the prasada of Ganesha. So Ganesha has offered meat, never offered vegetarian prasada. In the center, you have a very angry looking Ganesha from Thailand. And you'd be surprised, but there are Ganesha images all over Thailand. And there is one token Hindu, Brahmin, okay, who lives in the court of the king of Thailand. And this is because you need a Brahmana to perform the Raja Abhishek of every king. So the eldest son of the Brahmana will be the next Brahmana, and all the rest of them will be very happy Thai Buddhists in his family. So, and of course, Ganesha plays a very important role over there also as the god of prosperity and the god of knowledge. There is a very beautiful interaction even in Hindu sculpture between him and Saraswati. And his role goes onwards towards the east. I could go on and on about the different images, but we want to keep this short and sweet. On the extreme right-hand side, you have one of the most enigmatic Ganesha images. This is Kanji-ten, who is Ganesha in Japan. And the entire image and the worship of Kanji-ten is sometimes, or Vinayaka-ten as he's called, is sometimes very deeply discussed and debated as to whether this is Ganesha or another elephant-headed deity, but most people are quite confident that this is Ganesha as he moves to the extreme east. We have large numbers of celebrations with Ganesha playing an important role. What you see on the top left-hand side is the famous Durga Puja, when the goddess Durga comes down to spend time at her maternal home. And with her come her daughters, Lakshmi and Saraswati, and her sons, Vinayak and Skanda, or Kumara. Kumara, sorry, is hidden behind the image. But you can see Ganesha on the left-hand side. He's normally a very light, whitish, pink-colored head on an otherwise, well, regular colored body, whatever the color of all the other deities is, more or less. He's shown married to a banana tree, which is normally wrapped in a red-bordered white sari and is called the kola bow. And is part of a very important set of rituals and ultimately the Visarjan that takes place. In the west coast of India, the Ganapati celebrations, the 10 days of the Ganapati celebrations are perhaps the biggest festival in Western India, and Mumbai and Pune are the headquarters of this. And we see tons of large Ganesha images in Mumbai immersed every year into the sea at Chowpatty and Juhu. This is just an example of 3 of the images entering down to the waterline. The most important of these images in Mumbai, of course, is the famous Lalbagh Raja, an image that is actually built on location and not brought from anywhere because it's too large an image to cart, and then it's very carefully carted down to the sea and is actually limited in height only by the flyovers under which it has to pass. Very, very deeply revered, enormous lines line up during the celebrations. You see once again the Ankusha in one hand. You see the lower right hand in Abhaya Mudra, okay? The gesture of benevolence, asking you to take refuge in him. And interestingly, you see the Sudarshana Chakra on the top right hand. So that's a very interesting amalgam. And you see a very beautiful mace on the lower left hand. One leg is always raised on a stool. This is the classic iconography of Lalbagh Raja. The lines are very often, it takes 20 plus hours for you to get darshan. And there is an enormous amount of fervor and faith. And people believe that if you actually stand in lines and do the darshan of Lalbagh Raja, you will get what you want. So he is what is called affectionately a Manacha Ganpati. Huge donations are made every year by people, and a lot of good work is done by the trust. Similarly, there are the Guru Seth Halwai Ganpati is Pune's equivalent to this one, and they stopped taking donations a long time ago because from collecting donations because the sheer volume of donations that have flown in and the monies that they have in escrow are enough to take care of all the celebrations that they have to conduct. And finally, of course, I can't wrap up without a very modern version of Vignakarta. This is Moliart's and the late Anirudh Sainath's beautiful image of a very Vietnam era multiple barrel machine gun carrying Ganesha. And just to tell you that he is so prevalent in art and so prevalent in life that it's impossible to miss out on him in various different walks. So thank you very much, folks, for being with us. And here are our various different handles: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Please follow us. Please hit the like button. Please hit the bell to subscribe to our channel. And we look forward to seeing you with more in the coming week. Looking forward to seeing all of you all there. Thank you very, very much for being with us and have a great, great weekend.